2022 SEAC Young Member Group and SE3 Mentorship Panel. Glad you all could make it here virtually today. Just some of our objectives today are to briefly review some mentorship basics. What is it? Why is it? How is it? And then we'll open up for some panel discussion for our 4, maybe 5 wonderful panelists. And then we'll have some live Q&A. On the screen right now, you can see a QR code, and then I will also, paste into the chat a link for you, to throughout the session, if anything pops up that you would like to share with the group or ask of the panelists in the live Q&A portion. You can submit your questions using this link. You can use the link more than once. It does not record any user data, so we won't know who it is. And like I was saying earlier, with the session being recorded, if something does come up and you're like, yo, I really don't want that to be on the recorded part, you can say that and we can hold that question until maybe we turn off the recording at the end, or something like that. So that's framework. We're going to speed through the mentorship basics because we're really here for the panelists and the live Q&A. But for those who may or may not be familiar with what mentorship is or why, mentorship is an opportunity. Basically, it's something that can be provided that helps bolster confidence, self-esteem, and expand networking opportunities within your profession. It helps ensure higher levels of engagement and retention for statistically. And then, the mentor-mentee relationship basically can be a motivator for younger engineers to set ambitious goals and lay out a framework to work towards them. Mentorship, I'm basically reading right now. Mentorship fosters effective communication and helps to bridge that knowledge gap between staff and management. Friendly reminder that our profession is basically largely apprentice-based, right? We do a formal education, but then you've got an extended period of time where you're learning from your elders within the industry. So this mentorship and the technical training are really important to how our profession functions. And again, just some non-numeric statistics about how mentorship, either as a mentor or a mentee, has notable benefits. Those with mentors tend to have higher salaries, more frequent promotions, higher job satisfactions, stronger ties and commitments to the organizations that they work for, and are thus less likely to jump ship and go elsewhere. Likewise, people who have mentors tend to be more productive, better socialized, less stressed, gather perspective from others, and then gain aspects to other aspects of the business than just what they're working on in that moment. Yeah, it's all good, yummy stuff. And again, speeding through this so that we can get to the actual panel, but just wanting to lay a framework rather. So one thing we wanted to discuss was 2 different styles of mentorship. As you kind of explore the world of mentorship, there's a bunch of different ways to approach it. None of them are right or wrong, but one of the big divisions, I guess, would be the difference between formal and informal mentorship, where formal tends to be something that's very structured, usually set up and assigned by your company or organization. It is, really more about like defining goals and measurable objectives, and is very, it is formal. I know I'm saying this very well, but there's a lot of good accountability associated with that structure, where there's set expectations and organization, and highly supported by the company in most cases. And then there's usually like we're going to meet every 3 months, 6 months, 2 weeks, you know, depending on where you're working, but it is something that's much more formal. And then another style is informal mentorship, where it's much more chemistry based, where, you know, it tends to be based on who you're interacting with on a regular basis, and just if there's good chemistry, they tend to be somebody that you go to with questions, and or, you know, somebody who wants to share their experience with you. It's very organic, allows you to gain insight and knowledge and support. But again, since it is less formal, you know, you're less likely to have things like set goals or set meeting schedules, because you're going to, in most cases, end up meeting like when it feels right or when you need support, and not like a routine meeting setup. You will also, at least in my experience and through some of the research, tend to find that when you're having mentors that are outside of your firm or your professional organization, that are still within the same industry, most of those tend to be more of the informal type, because it's we're going to touch base after a SEAC meeting, or we're going to you know, get together and grab a coffee, or my favorite, peer mentoring, you know, after a young member group plant tour, we're going to go to a happy hour, and then you're going to develop a relationship through that, where you can ask questions back and forth. And it's, again, really organic, really natural. So I'm going to pause there and say, does anybody have any questions about that, the distinction between those two? If not, we'll just skedaddle and move on. Again, I'm going to let you guys read this slide. Just traits of a good mentor. Biggest, I would say, is available, accessible, and willing to share knowledge. If you're willing to share knowledge, but you're not accessible, you know, that's a struggle. And if you're available but not interested, also a struggle. But yeah, and another key thing is being a safe space where somebody can come and ask questions, and it's okay to be wrong, and that's true of a lot of different supervisor roles. And then in a good mentee, again, one thing that a lot of mentors look for, you know, through our research is people who are willing to reach out and take the lead and are not reliant on their mentor to do all the legwork. Because usually mentors are people, they're busy people. This is the moral of the story. So making sure that as a mentee, you're understanding, you know, your responsibility to reach out when you need help, and help set schedule, you know, if you're wanting to set up a meeting, being really proactive about that. So, and through that, you've also got the respectful of time and boundaries, self-awareness, that kind of fun stuff. And then briefly, just to set the vocabulary while we're talking, you know, there are different, I guess, kind of roles that people can play throughout your career. So there's mentors, role models, and champions/sponsors. A mentor is an individual who offers guidance, advice, and assistance to reach career goals. Someone who can offer a different perspective. A role model is a person that's looked to by others as an example to be imitated, an example of what you want for the future. The fun thing is you don't actually need to personally know that person necessarily, and they don't need to know you at all. It can just be somebody who you appreciate what they're doing in the community and seek to emulate. And then a champion or sponsor is an influential leader who can guide your career in a positive way, someone who can vouch for you, speak to your strengths, an advocate whose opinion has impact. And to build this relationship, there's kind of a requirement of mutual trust that, like, if they're going to recommend you for a position, they know that you're going to step up and get the work done. And likewise, you know, these are really important people to have in your career for when a project's coming up, going, you know, Bill really wants to work on a masonry project. He hasn't gotten to. He's a great engineer. Let's put him on this job. I know he can do it. Stuff like that. And the cool thing about champions and sponsors is you may have them and not even know it. So just a fun thing to keep in the back of your mind. So without further ado, we're going to turn it over to our panelists. Excuse me as I turn my head to a different screen so I can read their bios. So Darcy Schumacher, I said that properly, correct? Okay, awesome. She started her career at Wallace Design Collective in their Kansas City office in 2003, received her Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from Missouri University of Science and Technology, and a Master's in Civil Engineering from the University of Kansas. You guys can still see this, right? Okay, just in case I'm bad at reading. She has worked for a variety of projects, including retail, commercial, industrial buildings, as well as numerous historic renovations, restoration projects. She's a licensed professional engineer in 25 states and a lead accredited professional. Darcy currently serves as the president of CREW, Kansas City, and on the National Council of Structural Engineers Association, Society of Engineer Equity and Engagement Committee, so SE3. She's past president of the Kansas City Architectural Foundation and a member of various structural professional organizations such as Structural Engineering Association of Kansas and Missouri, the American Institute of Steel Construction, and the American Institute of Architects. Darcy was named the 2017 ENR Midwest and National 20 Under 40 Award winner. Congratulations, by the way. Mackenzie Glass serves as Martin Martin's sustainability manager and is a project engineer on the investigative team. She has 6 years of experience with the firm providing investigative services on a variety of structures, including industrial, higher education, healthcare, and residential facilities. In line with her existing building experience, she is a structural engineering emergency response certified, so SEER. In her role as a sustainability manager, Mackenzie leads an innovative sustainable practice operations in the company's SE 2050 committee. She's also involved in professional organizations as co-chair of the SEAC Sustainability Committee and active in the NCSEA Sustainability Committee. Thanks for all you do, by the way. Anna Vitro is a senior project engineer at Anchor Engineering in the residential structural department. She has 7 years of experience, 5 of which have been spent designing plans for production homes, remodels, and custom homes, townhomes, and apartments in Colorado. As someone who has worked for multiple companies since beginning her career, Anna has discovered a passion for the onboarding and mentoring process, which led her to serve on Anchor's mentorship committee. And Phil Taylor is a design engineer too at JVA Consulting Engineer in the firm's structural department. He graduated from the University of Colorado in 2018 with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. In his 3 years at JVA, Phil has specialized in designing K-12 schools and solar energy developments. Phil volunteers for SEAC's Education Committee and is a founding chair of the JVA's Mentorship and Tutoring Committee, which seeks to support equitable pathways to STEM careers for Denver area youth. Prior to becoming a structural engineer, Phil worked for nearly a decade as an environmental journalist in Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Denver. And then I am going to creep real quick to see if Cameron was able to join our call today. It does not look like she was. She got called to a site visit late last week, so she's not able to join us today, but she was going to represent our our entry-level engineers with 1 to 2 years of experience. But unfortunately, she could not join us today. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll leave our panelists up on sharing, and then we'll hop right into the questions. So as kind of an icebreaker, I'm hoping each of you in turn could kind of briefly describe what style of mentorship you've received throughout your career, and kind of pros and cons, and basically briefly outline your mentorship experience throughout your career. If we want to start with Anna, that'd be great.
All right. So I've worked for 3 different companies, and I've had wildly varying experiences when it comes to mentorship. Anchor's the first place I've been at that had a formal mentorship program, which I really like. I've had some bad experiences and some really good ones. And I find that it's best like when you have something you can relate to with your mentor, and you can get along like outside of the working relationship too. Those are my favorite relationships that I've formed over the years.
Wonderful, thank you for sharing. Mackenzie, would you like to share with us next?
Yeah, so at Martin, we have a, hold on, can you hear me okay? I want to make sure my speaker's working. Okay. So at Martin, we have a pretty solid background in formal technical type of mentorship with, Monday classes, seminars, assigned managers when you start as a young engineer. So that's kind of where I started, was more of a mentee and having those formal mentorships. And so about a year ago, we started a formal mentoring program that was geared toward professional and personal development. So the intent of this program is to establish an informal relationship in a formal way across all levels of experience and background within the company. And so that's how I've transitioned over time, as starting off in a more formal way as a mentee, but now as a project manager, it's definitely transformed into a more informal relationships overall, whereas when I'm still in the mentee role, while still taking on that mentorship role with mentees underneath me and guiding them in both ways.
And just to make sure I understood that properly, Mackenzie, did I hear you say like your relationship with your mentors tends to be more formal, but your relationship with mentees that are under you is more informal?
I would say it's transformed. So when I first started as a mentee, it was more formal, and as I've progressed in my career, I think that my relationships as myself being the mentee have become more informal as I've taken on different roles and met people outside of the company that I can relate to, and they can be my mentor. And when I have mentees, I think I have both informal and formal relationships. And so within our mentorship program, one thing that's nice about that structure is that the mentee gets to choose the type of relationship that they get to have with their mentor. And so, for example, if a mentee prefers a more formal or structured relationship, they can initiate that with, regular scheduled meetings and discuss a particular topic, as well as just checking in. But you might also decide to establish goals that you're working towards. So this can create a nice sense of that accountability. Whereas if the mentee prefers an informal relationship, it can be more on an as-needed basis, and they're coming to a mentor with a specific topic at a time that's appropriate for them. So maybe not relating back to a specific goal set, and it can be more flexible. But I think that's one of the benefits that we're seeing, at least within our program is just being able to create either that informal or formal relationship as a mentee.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for clarifying and sharing.
Yeah.
Phil.
Sure. I should mention that I've been a structural engineer for just over 3 years now, and 2 of those years were through a worldwide pandemic. So it's a very unique experience and certainly not normal. I'm aware that we do have a formal mentorship program at JVA. In the year before the pandemic began, I did not pursue that option. So my mentorship thus far in this career has been on an informal basis, and then disrupted pretty well by the global pandemic over the past couple of years. But now we're seeing new opportunities for face-to-face connections, which are extremely important. And I guess I have this unique perspective because I was an environmental journalist for several years before deciding to transition to structural engineering. So I've had the opportunity to be an entry-level journalist and then also become an entry-level structural engineer. And the differences between the two experiences could not be more stark. When you become a reporter, just to sort of paint the picture, when I started my career as a journalist, I moved to Washington, D.C., a place I'd never set foot in before, and started my first day, and I was sent up to Capitol Hill. And on day one, when you get out of school and become a journalist, your editor will tell you, write me a news story. And you have the skills and the tools and the experience to do that on day one. You can provide a deliverable to your team. Getting out of school, I had a great education, and then day one as a structural engineer is so different. And there are so many things you learn on the job that you can't learn in the classroom. And so the mentorship component in structural engineering, I think, is far more critical than it is, at least in my previous career as a reporter. So that's something I learned early on in this career.
Awesome. Thank you for providing that extra context as well, Phil. Miss Darcy.
Hi. So yeah, I've had probably a lot more informal mentoring. That's more how I prefer it as well. I like more of an organic kind of conversation and connection that suits both the mentor and mentee the best. I would say here at our company at Wallace, we try and focus more on creating a culture of mentorship and not necessarily a specific mentorship program. I think that, every company set things up differently. I think a big part of why we haven't necessarily set up a specific program is because setting the program guidelines for something that is also somewhat of a very personal type of situation kind of starts to create, instead of bringing people together, you can potentially have somebody who wants a certain mentor, doesn't get that mentor, then they end up in a different group. It kind of starts to create actually, it does the opposite of creating a good connection and a good fostering a good mentee and mentor relationship. So that's kind of why I think it's more important to create actually a culture around mentorship so that people feel as if they are able to ask questions and reach out for those mentoring topics. I also would say that a big part about mentorship too is that, I would consider that I have not had a mentor within my organization solely just as that mentor. I have definitely had a lot of mentors outside of the organization, and I think that's very, very healthy. And I would highly encourage people to do that, and we can get into more of that as we go. But I definitely think that mentorship should be very personal and creates a safe space, and that those individuals are committed. So I think that the informal process has worked a lot better for me. I have done a more formal program through other organizations, but it's also something that I've reached out and been as the other individuals did too. And so it's not necessarily an organization like a company, the firm sets it up. It's actually a subset of a committee somewhere. So that way, you for sure are getting the commitment of those individuals. So think you can do it both ways. It very personal on how it works best for the individuals.
Wonderful. And with that wonderful launching board, the next question that I'm going to roll into is kind of how I'm going to let anybody chime in on this one, but kind of how does your office size play a role in your mentorship relationships? Is it appropriate to seek technical mentors from outside your firm? And have you considered establishing a mentor-mentee relationship with individuals in the industry outside your firm? What benefits do you see, et cetera, et cetera? That kind of line of questioning. And since Darcy lined us up for that one, if you don't mind, if I'll let you start, and if anybody has anything else to add, please do so.
Yeah, absolutely. No, our company, so Wallace is about 225 or so, and we have 6 offices, but other than our headquarter office, the other ones are quite a bit smaller, proportionally 20-25 people or so. So it's a little bit smaller. Not that we haven't remote connected with a lot of our other individuals, but as far as like a personal connection, we definitely do that through making sure that we have created a culture of feedback as well. So I think that there's the, you know, each individual feels like they're getting feedback and they're understanding where they stand with projects. But from there, that's when you kind of bridge into the mentorship angle and aspect of things, and are able to say, hey, I need more help with this. I need to find somebody who can technically help me through this. And through that, I think that as leaders and managers, we need to be able to provide the opportunity within the organization for some of those things, but also highly encourage individuals to seek outside connections as well, because I think it really helps while rounding people and individuals. And I would say that as a small organization, we look to that to diversify ourselves, but also as a big organization, you should reach out, like within a big company, you should also reach out to others within the industry, even if you do have those resources within your firm, because I think it helps with the diversifying of opinions and ideas and thoughts and different ways to collaborate. One thing I think that is a challenge when you ask about, you know, going outside of your firm is the whole competitive angle and how to, you know, businesses and how do we, you know, not butt heads and feel like we're, you know, going to events and poaching each other and stuff like that. I think that a nice way to approach that is to try and get involved in maybe more of a national organization that is maybe has. That way it takes the edge off of being right there, you know, in somebody's backyard. The other way I think you can also do that, the other way I think you can also do that is to join other organizations that aren't necessarily your exact same industry. Like I said, I've been in Crew and in AIA and other things like that, and I found other people who know and understand my industry, but are also have maybe a little bit different perspective, and I think that's absolutely critical.
Thank you for sharing. Does anybody else have some perspective to share? Anna, I would love to hear from you because I know you've worked at a handful of different places and different sizes of firm.
Yeah, so my worst experience was at a really small company where there only was me, a coworker, and my boss. And my experience there was that, like, I didn't relate to my boss or my coworker at all. So it was really hard to ask them questions and feel like I was getting good feedback from either of them. And oftentimes I was pushed to the side and said, like, I don't have time for your questions, just figure it out. So I actually feel really comfortable in a company size that's around like 25 to 100. I feel like that diversifies the amount of personalities that are available to you to get to know and feel comfortable around. So I am all for that mid-size to, you know, larger company when it comes to finding a mentor, especially because I do like the informal mentorship more than the formal for long-term guidance, I guess.
When you were with a smaller firm, did you have the opportunity to reach out to people outside of the company through SEAC or, oh, help me somebody, I know there's a Women in Design group that's local, or did you reach out to find mentors outside of your organization during that time?
I didn't, and that probably would have been helpful to me. This job was back in Chicago, and I wasn't very involved in outside organizations out there, and it was very isolated to just my company. But yeah, having something like SEAC YMG, if I had joined that out there, and found other people in my industry, that probably would have helped matters.
Awesome, thank you for sharing. And I do want to take that opportunity to do a brief plug of one of the reasons that I really love the young member group is for me, it really was a really great outlet at the beginning of my career. I worked for a really small firm. And fun fact, I was the only female engineer. And so I really embraced SEAC and the young member group as an opportunity to find people who were, well, and I was also a good 10 years younger than anyone else also, as an opportunity to connect with people who were in similar shoes and going through similar things and in the same phase of the learning curve. So if people are out there and are feeling alone or anything like that, please know that you're not and that we're here. So please don't hesitate to put out an email to us and go, hey, I really need some content on this. Help. And happy hours and stuff. So anyways, minor digression, but an important plug. See. And I guess I want to take one further invitation of just kind of sharing resources of ideas of finding how to find a mentor outside of your company if you do work for a small firm or you're just not. If you're looking for a mentor outside of your company, I know Darcy name dropped Crew in Kansas City. There's always NCSEA, and there are various committees that you could get involved with and start networking with representatives from national or from firms across the country. Just wanted to spitball a couple other options for those who might be new to the industry of resources and places that they can start looking to grow their network.
I was going to say too that you may not find a mentor just right within your organization that way. Like, I know that there's a few people that are involved in national organizations like ATC and some of the other groups within my company, but just reaching out to them and saying, hey, I'm interested, could you put me in contact with somebody in a different group or a different area or a different region that I could speak with that, you know, you have that you think would be open to that. I think that would be a really great idea too. It's just using all your resources. And I think as a leader, I feel like if an employee came to me and asked, hey, I really would like to, you know, expand my understanding, and they had the confidence to come and talk to me about that, I think that there's also that level of trust and respect that you develop between the two of you, that you feel like, you know, they can come and ask those things of you and you can help them with those things. It's not that I'm lacking in one thing or the other, is that I've got a great network. Let's go ahead and leverage that. And so I think that asking your leadership to help you find those resources is really helpful too. And being on a committee, I think being on a board and a committee in an organization is a really, really big thing, because you find that you have to connect with people sometimes that is a little harder to do, whether that's like on the business side or technical side or however you look at that. Being part of that is a great learning experience, and also you see people at all different levels that you then start to build those informal mentorships with.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that in terms of how powerful that relationship can be. And, you know, that other person is likely their career was formed by a totally different group of their own mentors. And they'll have their own unique point of view or technical abilities that they can then share with you. And so, you know, oftentimes if you meet people at these national or state events or committees, you know, those can be people that have expertise that you are looking to gain or that you're also interested in. And oftentimes these people have been in that specific industry for a lot longer than you have. And so there's so much knowledge and perspective that can be shared from those people as well. And so, you know, even if they don't always have to know that they're considered your mentor, you can have people that are your mentors and they might never even register that or know that, but that's okay. You don't have to put a label on it. You can just know that those relationships are powerful to have and keep reaching out to build those.
Wonderful.
I think that's so true that oftentimes mentorship happens and it's not even acknowledged, really. All the relationships we have with our colleagues within and outside of our firms, it's sometimes just friendship and oftentimes it's mentorship at the same time. And so I was just going to say, I've only worked at one firm. We have a medium-sized firm here at JVA, and I feel like that's been a really good size to foster mentorship. And I can see Anna it was a unique perspective coming from a smaller firm previously, kind of a high risk, high reward situation where you don't have a lot of choices for mentorship within the company. And you would hope that you could find some folks who you have similarities with and can develop trust and you know, a positive relationship. But I think if you have a really large firm too, I don't think that would be an impediment to effective mentorship too, because we have smaller teams within larger firms too, and so that would be beneficial.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because our largest firm is in the Denver area in Lakewood, but we have other small firms. So I had worked in our larger firm and then moved up to our Vail office for a few years. And obviously that office was a lot smaller. And so you could really see the different dynamics between the two offices. But I think one of the powerful things that they encouraged is, you know, even though this is a smaller office, make it a point to reach out to the folks in the bigger office that are our mentors, or, you know, keep seeking those new relationships so that you can keep developing your career in that positive way. And so, you know, I think it says a lot to Anna's point of it can be hard in a small office, and even if it's going outside of your firm, that it can be really beneficial to do that.
Well, thank you for sharing. And we're going to do a brief pivot and speak to those who have or are in the process of making a transition from mentee to mentor, or doing a little bit of both. I feel like you never stop being a mentee, but just curious, has imposter syndrome played a role in your willingness to become a mentor? And how has your experience with a mentee changed the way you feel about your own expertise? I'll let anybody take the floor on that one.
I can start off on that one. So imposter syndrome is
not defined, sorry.
No, so my understanding is just that you have kind of almost an insecurity of, you know, I'm supposed to be a mentor, but do I have all the answers, and what if I don't, and does that make me as effective? That kind of mindset. And so overall, for me, it has not as much, and I try really hard to focus on just creating those open and honest relationships, because from a mentee perspective, just because you have a mentor doesn't mean that your mentor will have all of your answers to every question. And I don't expect them to, right? So that goes both ways. And so from the mentor role, I just try to keep in mind from the other side of the conversation that I might not have every answer, and that's okay too. And, you know, but as a mentor, I do put pressure on myself to help in whatever way I can and to find an answer or solve a problem. And I think that being in the mentor role really makes you want to understand whatever topic is being discussed thoroughly, and it oftentimes makes you a better person or a better engineer in the process. It can be hard though, because as engineers, we like to have all the answers to everything right now. So we have to be a little bit vulnerable in knowing that, you know, we might not always have the answer to every question, and that's okay.
Wonderful perspective. Thank you. If anybody has anything else to add, you're welcome to. If not,
I deal with imposter syndrome every day. As I mentioned before, I was an environmental journalist who one day decided he wanted to become a structural engineer. So, you know, going back to 2018, at the age of 34, I became JVA's oldest ever intern. So it felt weird. It's weird but necessary, obviously, to start somewhere. And the thought that I could be a mentor to someone else with this small amount of technical experience is strange to me. I do feel like, though, you know, my life experience gives me sort of valuable insights. I can share. I can be a valuable mentor for soft skills to peers at my firm. Communication, how to communicate effectively. How to get along with others, act professionally, organize my time, because I have so much previous work experience in a different field. But I guess, you know, the imposter syndrome, if someone's come to me asking me to be a mentor or just asking for advice, or either on an informal or formal basis, I mean, that shows that they see values in you that they want to emulate, and so that should give you the confidence and the self-esteem you need to believe that you can be an effective mentor.
that's wonderful, Phil. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we've got a question for Darcy here, and I think we'll transition into the live Q&A. A friendly reminder that the link is in the chat if you would like to submit questions. Really a reminder that you get out of this presentation what you put into it. So we're really looking for people to engage and ask some questions. So again, the link is in the chat. The questions are totally anonymous. So have at it. So for Darcy, where did it go? Oh, actually, we will have one more question after this. Sorry, filtering through my list. As a leader of your company, how do you balance the desire for young engineers to have mentor-mentee relationships alongside ensuring the company is maintaining productivity and profitability?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would definitely say, first and foremost, I don't know how many of you guys watched that presentation that I did on the 2020 survey results from SE3, but it's widely proven, and I think a lot of the points that you brought up earlier to Katie about having a mentor or being a mentor is that it's amazingly important, and it's basically in that survey that we found that 72% of individuals that had mentors throughout their career were more satisfied with their career development opportunities and satisfied in general, as opposed to 55% that said they really didn't ever have like a feel like they had mentorship. And I think that speaks to the fact that when people are happy, when individuals are happy and employees are happy, they will be more profitable, they will have better balance, they will be more engaged. And that to me is an amazing statistic that you can't ignore. So I do think it's very important to support those things. And I think it's important to allow all employees to make sure that they are finding those opportunities. And if you can help facilitate that, that's critical. You know, as companies, I think it's interesting throughout my career, you start and you really want to put out great projects, and I still want to put out great projects, but it's morphed into, now that I'm a leader, I want to make sure that I have great people and that my people are happy with how their career is going. And so it's morphed into like making people happy and keeping clients happy, and not just about the project that I'm working on, that I'm doing a really cool project. And I think that's what's really, really important, is to remember that holistically, we really are only as great as our people are, and they're our biggest asset, and you're the most important part of what we do. And so making sure that we can provide every opportunity, even though it takes time and effort away from, a billable hour, that is worthwhile. And it is, it's something that we need to make sure to invest in, whether it's within the company or finding those resources outside of the company. So I think it's very important. And I think it adds to our people, not just, in those aspects of they feel, more empowered and engaged and so on and so forth, but if we're able to find different perspectives and understand others, because we have different mentors throughout our career, inside or outside, however that works out, the more diversity and perspectives that you add, the better we'll all be in all things. And I definitely believe that's something within your career and also as a company. So I think it's very important.
Muted, sorry. Muted there for a second. Just doing a quick pivot to the, not really elephant in the room anymore, but how can we do a mentorship panel discussion right now without acknowledging the last couple of years in our world? And the overall question is just, how have each of you seen mentorship evolve within your career in the industry? And then specifically, how has COVID impacted the need or importance for mentorship? What has mentorship looked like for you in the past 2 years, while more employees are working from home and have less time around each other face to face? Yeah, and less of that, what I would call osmosis learning, where you're getting to overhear conversations with somebody else. So like getting to overhear how your boss talks to a client when you're, in a difficult situation or something like that. So I'm gonna start with Anna, if that's okay.
Yeah. So I had a manager in my previous job that was not very available, and when we worked in an office environment, it made it even more difficult to talk with that person. And so I ended up switching, which ironically, like my current manager and who I consider my mentor is mostly remote, but in a way that that's actually benefited me, because we've done like Teams calls, like for those client interactions where I can just kind of listen in and hear what she's saying and learn that way. Also, like when she comes to the office, I don't get much of an opportunity to talk to her. And so using Teams has actually benefited our relationship, because we can be working on 2 different things at once, but still on the phone and just kind of talking about other things outside of work, getting to know each other that way, which in turn fosters the mentor-mentee relationship that we have. So when I do have a question for her, then there's that trust that's been developed, and it turns into like a discussion of whatever it is we're working on. So in some regards, like COVID affected me negatively, but in other ways it benefited me. And I'm wondering if anyone else had similar, positive, negative experiences.
Well, from a mentorship perspective, I don't think COVID benefited me at all. I think it was tough for an entry-level design engineer to have. I had 1 year of a normal office experience where we were in the same physical space as one another, and then COVID hit, and we all went home, and that was really difficult because it's. I'm a reporter. I was a reporter before becoming a structural engineer, so I am by nature not scared to ask questions, lots of questions, and really get nosy and bug people. And Teams is a great platform for remote work, but it is much more difficult to seek help when you can't see someone. You can see the little dot, but you don't know where they are, what their real status is, and so I feel like my personal development did take a hit during the height of the pandemic. And I remember I was one of the first employees to go back to the office here in the Denver office, and for a very long time I was literally the only physical person in the space. And we had a structural department meeting where in different words I basically just said, "Come back, people, come back. I need help. This is not a job that I can learn without having my hand held from time to time." So it's definitely changed my trajectory, and I'm very hopeful for the future. And we've adapted as much as we can. But I think mentorship works best in a face-to-face format. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, I would probably echo that I'm not really sure how we change and do mentorship as easily this way remotely and such. I'm not really sure. I'm more of a face-to-face person as well, and so I think there's a challenge there, but I think that's the important thing, is that we acknowledge that and we try and figure out what tools we can use and how we can better move forward with that. I do know that, we have several individuals within our company that have been remote or always remote, that kind of thing, way before the pandemic happened. And I feel like we can reach out to individuals like that and try and see how they best have mentored that way. And maybe there's different ways that we can learn from that. But I definitely am open and interested to hopefully hear that there's more tools and more ways to continue to navigate that. I do think it's a reality that we have more people that will be remote and or reduced in office schedules, which is the way it is moving for some organizations. But at the same time, I also would say that here, a lot of us came back to the office, and so it wasn't really something that we've seen had a major effect on us specifically. But I do think as an industry and just in general, as professional organizations, I hope that we figure out how better to utilize some tools to make sure that mentorship is happening.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points, and I think that with COVID, it was just such an eye-opener of how important it is to take the extra steps. So you have to be so much more intentional about your communication and make an effort to catch up about work items and making sure that your mentee understands what's being said from a training perspective, from a technical perspective, from a communication perspective, from a QA/QC perspective. So it's just so many things that you really have to make sure that you're putting in that extra effort for. And not only that, but checking in and saying, "Hey, how are you doing today?" how are you doing on a personal level? And so I think it's worth it to take that extra step on both ends of the spectrum. And it can be difficult because it can be more awkward to make that initiation sometimes, because you might, as a mentee perspective, you might need to directly set up a conversation to talk about something. Whereas, typically I think a lot of people, Philip and Darcy have mentioned, like, they prefer more informal relationships, and it's easy to stop by a desk because you're grabbing your morning coffee and get some advice. But when you're remote, you don't have that option. And so it's really important to, as a mentor, especially, to try and take that extra step and make sure that as a mentee, you're still moving forward, because like Philip said, that can be really difficult, especially from a young engineering perspective. I can't imagine trying to start my engineering career and everyone's going remotely. That would be a really difficult position to be in. So it's worth taking the extra step.
One of the ways that I combated the distancing that I had with my boss was every Monday I would try to call her in the morning and just catch up and tell her, this is what I have on my plate, and am I missing anything? And if I knew that she was busy, I would be like, what time are you available for a conversation? And I would set something up in Outlook so that we both would remember to actually have that talk. And so even if you are in the office, that could still be a useful strategy to make sure you're talking with your mentor or anybody that you have questions with or need to be on the same page as.
Transitioning to one of our online questions. Thank you everybody for sharing there. I think it is always a useful reminder, how valuable the face-to-face interaction is, and physical presence, and just makes you be more accessible. I know that's something that I have definitely throughout the pandemic lost track of more than once. So again, always helpful to have that reminder. And I'm going to add that during a presentation at the NCSEA Summit in New York earlier this year, we had some of this work from home or back to the office conversation. And one of the things that they referenced, and I'm not going to be able to reference a resource or any specific statistics, but obviously the new engineers, obviously took a big hit with their training when we went home. But the next group of people who took the largest hit were those who were kind of the project engineer, senior project engineer level, who had enough skills to be self-sustaining, but aren't learning the skills to be able to take the next step in their career. So that one hit me, because that's kind of where I'm at, and it was a friendly reminder. So just thought it's worth sharing that. Anyways, so one of our questions, Darcy mentioned a culture of mentorship, and Anna mentioned feelings of belonging. How do you encourage and incentivize effective mentorship culture at your company? I think that's kind of an open question, but.
Okay, I can start with that. I think a big piece is just creating a safe space and being able to find somebody that you can feel comfortable talking to. As before it was mentioned, just being able to be open and be vulnerable in a discussion. And I think sometimes that's the best way to start building that trust is to kind of show a little bit of that vulnerability, talk about those things. We all have something to learn from each other. And I would say I've learned just as much being a mentor as I have been as a mentee. And I really think that that's valuable. And I think being open and honest about that, and then creates that safe, comfortable space to share. And again, continuing to encourage others that, you know, I don't have all the right answers, but I'm willing and open to try and look for those. I think that takes a huge step forward, because then it's not intimidating, and it builds confidence in also the other individuals that is either a mentee or a mentor, that they can have the confidence, they can ask those questions to you, or they provide value. I always like to make sure that when I'm paired up with somebody, you know, more formally or whatnot, I make sure to let them know, hey, by the way, I really appreciated that conversation. I actually just talked to somebody about what you and I discussed, and it really helped me. I appreciate that, you know, and I think creating that culture that it's okay, it's great to be open and share about things, and then, you know, build on the successes and acknowledge what those are, I think that's how you create that culture.
And to expand on that just a little bit, I've heard Darcy say the safe space term a few times, and so we also have talked about that a lot in our office, and it's really important from both a mentee and a mentor perspective. So when you're creating a safe space, there's a lot of different things that can entail, but some of our top ideas for a safe space is having mutual respect for each other, making sure there's confidentiality within your discussions, creating a no judgment zone and being authentic, and then also just make sure that you're actively listening. You know, you can learn a lot just by listening to what the other person is saying without trying to butt in with advice right away. So those are kind of some of the points that we try and make when creating our safe space, so to speak.
Okay, transitioning to another question. Thinking about your career, how many mentors do you feel like you have had at any given time? Did they fill different needs, technical, work-life balance, communication, etc.? Are you interacting with them regularly, daily, weekly, monthly, etc.?
Okay, I'll jump on that one. I think that I probably would say on average, I don't know exactly, but I would say on average, I probably have a couple people that I always reach out to and or am, you know, connected with, even now. And I would say now that I do still feel like I have mentors. I would say more now they're more role models of certain qualities or characteristics that I'm looking to kind of build and work on. But I would say that's the same kind of concept. But throughout my career, I would say that I would definitely have people within the office that I would try to engage for certain technical or even non-technical mentorship, but that I always had at least 1, 2, or 5 other people that, and a lot of it is so organic for me. I have kind of peers and or other people in organizations right now that there's a woman that is on the EDC, the Economic Development Council, and she is a force. She connects with everybody and all of these things. And I'm just like, you know, I need to understand how I can better position myself that way, and looking to figure out how I can learn from that. So I would say at one time, I definitely have a handful of people that I reach out to for multiple different reasons and different aspects. I'm also an extrovert, so if you haven't noticed, so I do think that's one reason. I would say, and maybe this is getting slightly off topic if I haven't brought it up, but I do think it's really super important that whether you're a mentor or mentee, the relationship should be built upon also you not always looking to get something from that relationship. It's also more what you can give in that relationship on either side. And so I think that's a big piece that you learn from trying to find ways to also give in that relationship than what you get in that commitment. So, but I definitely think throughout your career, you should have it's always great to have that mentor that you've had forever and ever. And I definitely had a mentor, my boss here, for a decade, 12 years or whatever, until he had retired. I would say he was my primary mentor and sponsor. But I definitely had multiple people outside of that I would go to for other aspects of different parts of my career, or sometimes you just need a mentor, personally as well, dealing with things. So I highly encourage that, because not everybody fills that same bucket, that same void.
I have multiple people that I like to go to for asking questions that are more technical, but then I also have I'll rely on my friends who are also in this industry, who work for different companies, where maybe they have a technical expertise, like with masonry. I work with wood a lot, but every now and then I like come across masonry, and I have a friend who works with that all the time, so I'll reach out to her. But your friends can also be valuable mentors as well, especially when talking about like your work-life balance, and also like your work relationships. Like, you can't necessarily go and talk about your work relationships to your coworkers, but having your friends be the mentor for that kind of side of things is also a benefit. So you can find mentors anywhere, really.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that you have about just different values for different types of mentors, because I feel like when I'm looking for a mentor, when I have like that has to personal development, I tend to look for similarities with certain values. If they have similar life values, and is family important to them? Do they have a good work-life balance? And are they happy people? Have they put themselves in a position that they enjoy their work and their life day in and day out? Whereas for mentors, when I'm focused on more professional or career development, I tend to look for other types of characteristics. I'm looking at the technical abilities that I maybe need help in, or I'm looking at, is this person well respected within the firm? Do their peers value their input? Are they successful? Is it, I don't necessarily need to want their specific job, but maybe there's portions of their job that I aspire to. And so I'm not as concerned about finding similarities in those circumstances, because I feel like some of those mentors that are different than me provide another point of view or a different way to solve a problem that I wouldn't have thought of before, especially from a technical perspective. So it provides just another learning opportunity. And as Darcy has mentioned, that even if you don't connect on a personal level, there's always something to be learned from other people. And so I think there's a lot of different types of characteristics to look for within your mentors. And for me, I definitely don't connect on a daily basis, I would say, or maybe not even a weekly basis, but throughout the year, it's I don't know, probably maybe not over 20 interactions, but for more formal type of mentorships, but definitely reaching out consistently, whatever that time may be, but keeping a consistent relationship is important.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's very difficult to quantify how many mentors I have and how often I interact with them. As I said at the outset, I don't have any formal, acknowledged, structured mentorship relationships at the moment, but there's a lot of spontaneous mentorship that happens on a very frequent basis every week, both in person and over Teams. And I feel empowered to seek advice and mentorship from anyone at this company, and I think that's really important. Whether I use it or not, there's intrinsic value just knowing that there's open doors in every office in this building, and so I have that resource when however often I need it. So, you know, if it's technical mentorship that I need, I have peers who are at or slightly ahead of me in experience, who I think are great for that type of mentorship. If it's more soft skills, relationships, and company politics or ethics or relationships with clients, you know, I feel empowered to go to a project manager, a senior project manager, or principal, and get their advice on this or that. So I think, regardless of how many people are considered my mentors, it's just good to know that everyone's available for that kind of guidance.
Wonderful, thank you. Going to transition back to one of our list questions, which is, I don't see quite eye to eye with my mentor that my company has set up with me. Can you break up with a mentor or a mentee? Are you stuck? What are some ways to approach that breakup? Or good ways to approach that breakup?
So here at Anchor, in our mentorship program, we actually have 2 mentors to each mentee. And it's specifically so that if there's an issue with one, then they could talk to the other separately. And the third person can maybe provide some insight onto how to make that relationship better, or lead them to the correct person to make a change of mentor or mentee relationship. And I really like that structure to have, you know, that person who's aware of what's going on, who can, you know, be almost impartial to the official mentor-mentee relationship that's been established.
I would also say that, I mean, obviously this is more of a formal program that the question is kind of alluding to. And I would say that the key to that would be that in the beginning of that program is to kind of set up some clear expectations. And, you know, before, like when it's positive and when it's just getting started, and just laying out the groundwork to say, you know, if at any time this doesn't feel like it's serving you, serving me, let's just check in about that and figure out a way to make sure that you set up the expectations up front, that it doesn't necessarily have to, you know, you lay the groundwork that you can break up at any point in time if it's necessary for, you know, either of you, because I don't think it serves anyone to be stuck into a relationship like that. Again, I think we talked about how I think it is personal, regardless of even whether it's technical or not. You know, sharing and working through a mentorship is a part that you need to make sure that you're comfortable talking to that person. So if you lay out some of the groundwork up front for that, then I think that's great for those expectations. I also think it's important that if you do have that formal program, that you've got maybe a way to say, you know, here's a check-in period incrementally, and then at that point you can check in, and that way it also gives yourself a way to formally evaluate whether it's going well for either party, or that maybe we need to move on to, you know, something else, whether it's a personality thing or whether the relationship has served its purpose too, because sometimes you're good to go and ready to move on to maybe the next thing, and that's totally fine. That's an evolution, that's development, that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? So I think being able to make sure that you can outline some good expectations and then have check-ins, if it is a more formal thing that you're set up with somebody specifically, so that you know that you're actually accomplishing the goals of being set up with that mentor specifically.
Thank you. Next question is, early in your career, what did you feel was the biggest need? Early in your career, what did you feel the biggest need for mentorship was? Technical, learning how to juggle multiple projects, how to maintain professionalism, and how have you sought out that mentorship? Were you asking lots of questions, finding a coworker at a similar level or slightly above, etc.? Has that need changed as you've grown in your career? more technical skills, managing people, learning to delegate, etc. And how have you filled that new need? I want to jump to somebody. Phil, I feel like I don't know why.
Sure, because I'm still at the beginning of my career. Yeah, at this stage,
You've developed a lot.
I've developed a lot. Yeah, but at this stage, it's still 80% technical mentorship versus about 20% non-technical, soft skills, relationship-driven mentorship. I started this career at age 34, 35, so I came in with some perspective and experience that most entry-level structural engineers probably do not have. So that's kind of skewed my needs a little bit to the technical areas. But I'm sure that shifts over time. There's a balancing. And at some point, I do look forward to a time in life where I don't need very much technical help. Still working on it.
There's nothing wrong with that. Does anybody else want to jump in on that question?
I was just add that, it's when I first started, right out of school, working under a mentor that was more of a technical role, and that, as I moved throughout my career, I wasn't working under that person or those people anymore. I moved on to different groups or different sectors, but that guidance and getting to know that person through them being a technical mentor, I also got to know them on a personal level too. So as I moved throughout my career, I was able to still reach out to that person for personal development, professional development, sometimes technical skills too, but I was able to still keep that relationship, and that I feel like that served me in a lot of ways that has been really beneficial. And then now being in a project manager role, it's a lot less technical mentorship that I receive and a lot more of, reaching out to principals and saying, okay, how do I word this statement, or this is kind of a tricky or difficult conversation. Can you help me navigate what this looks like? And so I think there's, in terms of the need, it has definitely changed from a technical to a lot less technical at this point. But, then you have your mentees that maybe then they need the technical mentorship. So in a way, it's a full circle, because then you're providing a little more technical advice in that regard as well.
Thank you. Let's see. I'm gonna really quick, just because it's 1:20 and we're hoping to be able to release people at 1:30. And then if anybody wants to stay around and hang out and do some more intimate touching base and catching up, we are gonna leave the line open for about half an hour after the call. Our speakers don't need to stay, anything like that. But I just know from past experience, and in person at least, some of the most valuable conversation tends to happen after the formal presentation is over. And so we want to just take a stab at an experiment and see how that goes in a virtual environment. But I do want to make sure I share some announcements. Let me share my screen real quick. So the Education Committee has a plant tour with Wells Concrete Precast manufacturing facility on June 23rd at 8 a.m. Registration will be up on the SEAC website starting Thursday of this week. Tour will focus on manufacturing of precast framing and components. We'll tour the main production floor, outside production, steel shop, or discuss the steel shops, carpenter shop, and quality control lab. Sorry. Don't need to look at somebody's face, sorry. Learn about a range of review process of architectural concrete. And then, again, value of in-person contact, have the opportunity to catch up with some of your SEAC friends and build new connections. So there's that one. And then for the young member group, and this event is also open to all of SEAC, just understanding that it is geared towards people with who are entering the industry or that kind of thing. Anyways, oh, sorry, got myself mixed up. I'm going to start by talking about the Zimcore shop tour, which is Thursday, July 21st. So we'll be visiting a steel fabrication shop, kind of learning about the process of fabricating steel, kind of talking about technology updates and how those impact the decisions we're making as designers, give the opportunity for conversation about, you know, which details are a pain in the butt and which ones are fun or easy. Again, developing a relationship with fabricators is always of great value because at the end of the day, we really are working as a team, even though, you know, we're not directly a team. We're all working towards the same goal. So, you know, learning about the struggles they're facing can give us a little bit more insight about why we do some of the things we do, or why we should be doing something different, or why they want us to do something different, et cetera, et cetera. And after the shop tour, we'll be doing a happy hour at a beverage establishment not too far away. So again, another opportunity to touch base with your peers. And then on July 13th, we will be holding the SEPE study group kickoff for any of those people who might be looking to start studying for their licensure exams. We'll be meeting at Blue Moon. This is an opportunity to ask questions of people who have taken the exam recently, learn about their experiences, as well as connect with others who will be studying as well. So you can self-organize study groups or just share contact information. So as you're studying, if you hit a problem and you're confused, you know, you have other people that you can reach out to and commiserate with, as well as if you're interested in registering for any of the online review courses as a group in the hopes of getting a discounted rate. We'll have some information about that at the session. Both of these events are live up on the SEAC website for you to register for. And we look forward to seeing everybody. So that's that. Oh, I also, again, want to say thank you to the young member group for all the hard work they put in to compiling our questions. I also want to give a really big shout out to JVA's Women's Impact Network. A lot of the content that we shared at the beginning, you know, the basic overview of mentorship, that content was put together for our Women's Impact Network at JVA for a mentorship presentation that was held at 2018. So I want to thank them for doing the legwork and inspiring this event. So thank you for all that you guys do. I know Kate is on the call. She was a huge part of that presentation and is also on the SEAC SE3 committee. And I'm sure we've got some other representatives as well, Amber. So thank you guys. I also want to open up the floor live. Is there anything that anybody wants to ask, just in general of the room? Or just share some love and appreciation for our wonderful panelists?
I'll ask a question, Katie.
Please.
So I guess my question is geared towards the panelists, but I'm just curious. I think there's a lot of good information about mentorship out there, and I'm just curious if there's anything that you feel like is very important that has not been touched on yet, that you want to leave us with.
Oh, wonderful. Good job, Amber. Crushing it.
I think the one thing that I would just say, I think I mentioned it briefly earlier, but just making sure that you're committed and you have a commitment on both sides. I think that's a really big deal to getting something out of this, and then that you're looking to make sure that you're giving something as well as getting something out of it, because that is a big part of business in general, on all sides. You know, when you're not only when you are, you know, part of a mentor relationship, but just in general, buying and selling and just, you know, coordinating with people and whatnot. You know, if you're always asking for something, then you're kind of a pain in somebody's rear end. But if you have something to give, and we all do, at all levels, then I think that that's really important, is to make sure to acknowledge that and come to the table with those things. And then it creates an even better platform for you to have a great relationship with that mentor and mentee.
Touching on that a little bit, from a more technical side of things, when you have a question, I've always found that it's nice to go to that person with at least one solution that you've thought of. And that shows that you put thought into it, you were trying to solve the problem on your own, and maybe you came up with a solution, but it's just one of your three that you have. And you just need direction on, you know, which of the three is going to be the best option. Just going to your mentor with, or anybody with a technical question where you're just asking what's the answer, then that's kind of that, just going into it with something to receive that Darcy was talking about, instead of bringing something to the table to discuss.
Yeah, that's really great feedback.
So I guess I complained a lot about the pandemic and remote work and the transition to a Teams platform. But I mean, one thing I didn't mention is that there's a lot of, I guess you could say, like micro mentorship that's happening over remote platforms. The ease and efficient nature of communication over Teams and similar platforms allows for a lot of good back and forth, very fruitful back and forth between you and your colleagues. That it's not formal mentorship, it's not face to face, but I kind of like the micro mentorship aspect to it. Whether that's sharing an email, a draft of an email with a project manager before you send it to a client, getting their thoughts on how that's going to be perceived. Whether that's a good way to put that, you know, sharing a detail and marking things up in Bluebeam. I think there's a lot of mentorship that can happen without a face-to-face lunch together, for example.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that, like, again, I know I mentioned that I'm kind of in that sweet spot of, I feel like there's a lot that I've been able to do at home, but I know there's things that I'm missing by being at home. But wanted to emphasize one positive that I've really seen that I'm very confident is going to carry into going back to the office, is the degree of cross-pollination that we're getting to see. You know, you're not just reaching out to the people who are in your local office. You know, JVA has 4 or 5 offices, and there are people that I've gotten to meet and really get to know in a virtual setting, who are peers or slightly above me, or way above me, that I might have hesitated more to reach out to in a traditional office environment. But now that I've created a pattern of course I can reach out to them, it's, you know, I'm so much more likely to do that, you know, moving forward when we are, you know, all together in person, rather than, you know, waiting for somebody to finish off a conference call that's going to take 2 hours, or, you know, whatever it is.
And I think that's a good point, Katie, even with cross mentoring and learning from higher levels learning from younger levels, whether it comes to technology or whatever it might be. It's a great way for our industry to continue advancing. And, you know, at this point in time, what's really cool is that there's a sense of normalizing these types of discussions and being able to talk about mentorship and make sure that people are happy in developing those relationships that they need to feel comfortable at work and having that transparency. And so I would just say that, you know, take advantage of it and reach out. And as a mentee, you're the one that will need to take the initiative and to make it happen. And it's worth it. So just be bold and take that step.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. As I said, I want to respect everybody's time. So we're going to call I'm going to turn my camera back on. Sorry. A quote unquote formal close to the event. So I want to say thank you to our 4 panelists. You guys brought a lot of wonderful insight today. Really appreciate your time and expertise and knowledge and context, all the good yummy stuff. So thank you for being here. Know that you do not have to stay, anybody, but you are welcome to hang out for a little bit longer if you'd like. Again, I'm going to consider the floor open if anybody has anything they want to bring to the table. So it's yours. Carry on.
Well, thanks, Katie, for organizing. I've got to drop off, but I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah, I echo that. I appreciate being able to be on the panel and share some insights from my own experience. But I also do have to jump off and